level of excitement this time of year always the same?
Yeah. It's finally get to be with our guys a lot more than 2 hours a week, and all the specific rules and the skill instruction, and the starting gate's open and away we go. And from a staff standpoint, you get busier maybe with other things outside of the office, but it's what you do and what you enjoy doing, and so the excitement of that. And then for this particular club, seeing how the pieces come together, because it's an inexperienced club with a lot of ability, and see what happens.
So that's to some extent this team's identity. What can you expand on that? What do you think this team's identity is as you enter the start of practice?
Well, I'm not sure. That's gonna. We've had the fall with them, and we've given them a report card, and certain guys had better falls than others, which is typical. But until you put the real uniforms on and the real starting gate starts, and a lot of guys change. They change for the better sometimes, and sometimes, unfortunately, for the worse. And then some unanswered questions about who's going to assume certain roles. We still have some tremendous battles on the field, and maybe the biggest question mark going into this year would be the roles in the pitching staff, with the weekend rotation being brand new, and losing our closer and things like that. And then we've had some guys with little hiccups in their health. So it's going to have to happen in a hurry. And I think, not that we ever like to start slow, but I think we're going to find out a lot more in March than we are in February, late March maybe.
Where's Cole at through the fall?
Everything's been good. It's both him and Matt Crook. Their rehab has been. There's been no hurdles or circumstances that have set them back much. And Cole's doctor has an unusual protocol a little bit. Not unusual. It's just something I'm not familiar with, where he was pushing himself pretty hard in the end of December, and then asked to put the ball down for a short period of time. So we'll start the season on a pitch count with him, probably a 1 or 2 inning pitch count, and decide whether to use him at the end of the game in an emergency situation, or to have it be predetermined to start or come in a certain inning at the beginning. And then hopefully he'll continue to pass all his tests and be able to build up. And again, that might be one of the reasons why our rotation will be more solidified in March with him in the mix than some other unproven guys.
You had talked briefly in the summer about possibly moving Heineman into a pitching role in the bullpen. Is that something that still might be in the mix?
Yeah, he's still doing that. Right now, he's been given the green light to hit, and he's putting a lot of emphasis on that. And actually, in our skill instruction, been doing very well. He's driving the ball and looks to be back up to speed, running the bases really well. We're playing him in the outfield a little bit at first base, and try to keep the wear and tear off his arm from third base. And but he will pitch some. Tim Cisnera, a catcher, will also pitch some, and then Josh Graham's going to pitch some too. And actually came in here as a kind of a two-way guy, and we haven't pitched him much, and we like what we see so far with Josh. So we'll see how that works out.
Is there any chance at this point you start a true freshman that first game in Hawaii? But it's Peterson kind of being the big gun, but
it could be. That'll be earned, not talked about. But David's been very good. He's been one of the. I'd like to tell you that all 5 candidates, excluding Cole, I'm not counting him right now, have been very consistent, but they haven't. David's been up and down, but is very talented young man, very poised young man, and I think could he be the next Tyler Anderson that starts for 3 straight years on Friday? Possibly. He's certainly capable of that. There's some other candidates for that, and that'll be earned. And we had a report card off the fall, and then nobody clearly has identified themselves as the best guy. Probably the most consistent pitcher has been Garrett Clevenger, and he'll be our closer. So he served as a freshman and sophomore as that setup guy for Jimmy and Jake, and we think he's ready to be that guy that you hand the ball to in the 9th inning and gets it done.
How about Nogasek?
He's been inconsistent, a little bit of command issues, and Coach Stiles and he are working very hard to eliminate some of the mechanical things that go with that and the mentality things. And so he's shown flashes of brilliance, but also has shown some yucky outings, and Patton the same way. And Peterson, same way, and Jack Carricker, we're going to try him as a starter. And then Connor Harbor's been very impressive, a JC transfer from Western Nevada. Reminds me a little bit, I hate to put this moniker on him, but he reminds me a little bit of Jason Windsor in my days from Cal State Fullerton. That's a good comparison. If he can be a shadow of a resemblance of him, we're in pretty good shape.
So those are the 5 you talked about that are kind of in the mix?
Yeah, those 5.
Is Mitch Tolman now at second base? Is that true?
Yeah, that's his primary position, although we had, unfortunately, right when we came back, A.J. Balta hurt his knee and is having knee surgery and is out for the year. So, and that how that equates to Tolman is we were going to look at Mitch at second, but now he may have to go back to first if some other first base candidates don't take a hold of that position.
How about third base then?
Then Matt Uriste probably is, right now, if we were going to start tomorrow, the JC transfer from Mount St. Jack, it would be our third baseman.
Where does Phil Craig St. Louis fit in? Is he going to be in infield, first base a little bit?
He could be a first baseman. He's playing in the outfield, getting his reps there, trying to learn that position. He was a junior college second baseman. He can really hit, but we think we have some infielders that are ahead of him in the middle for sure. So he'll probably be a DH, outfielder, possibly first baseman.
Him being in the lineup every day, or?
Yeah, right now he's one of our top 9 or 10 hitters, and we have. I think overall, what I've said about this team is we have excellent depth, position player-wise. We probably will be very similar to our top 12 in years past, but the difference is 12 through 20 are viable, real guys that we think could play every day in a lot of college programs. I couldn't say that about all the guys we've had in the past, that last third of the hitters, I'd say. We've had some great bench play over the years, guys, because their mentality have been ready to do that. Guys like Kevin Shepard in the past, and Santos and Menares and things like that. And but it's going to be a real battle, I think, who gets to be the top 9, in March when we get to evaluate guys fairly with the uniforms on and everything else. That's a good problem to have.
Sure. Who's the favorite first base right now?
Brandon Cuddy is the most natural guy. Since AJ went down with his knee, we've experimented a little bit with Heineman there, and he'd be fine there.
But Heineman's your go-to third baseman, isn't that what?
Possibly, yeah, or outfielder. And, Scotty's very versatile. We've inserted a freshman named Jacob Goldfarb there, and without a whole lot of Coach Ullman's tutelage, he seems to be very instinctive at that position. He's a good athlete, a good base runner, a tremendous hitter, has a great future in this program. So I would say between Goldfarb and Cuddy would be the most obvious 2-horse race for first. It could include anybody, at this point.
You mentioned a couple of your catchers being in the mix on the mound. What about catching, and how do they factor in there, and what's left to sort out there?
We've got 4 good ones. Sean Chase continues to he had a couple of home runs yesterday in a voluntary scrimmage, I heard, and seems to be continuing to get better and better. Tim Cisnera came out of the fall rated ahead of Josh Graham in a close race, but those are definitely the top 3. Then Slade Hagan from Montana, unbelievable skill set, but still some rough edges. Not a lot of baseball played in Montana, but he's going to be a tremendous player. And then we had 5 actually, and Jack Kruger decided to transfer, and he's at Orange Coast Junior College. So we've got 4 very competent catchers, and we're deep in quality at that position since I've been here. So that's good news.
Looking around at the Pac-12 and the conference, obviously Oregon State's always a monster on the schedule. Who else do you see, and where do you kind of see yourself coming in and pecking order there?
Well, no shock that it looks like going to be a very competitive race as always. I'm glad you started with the Beavers. They're not getting a lot of outside love for top 25, and when we do our preseason poll, there are probably going to be some other teams that are ranked higher than them in the preseason for our conference, but they're back-to-back defending champions. So until you knock them off, start with them. They've lost a lot of personnel and quality personnel but Coach Casey and his staff do a nice job, and they do a good job in recruiting, and so they're going to be solid as usual. UCLA, I think, will have a big bounce back year. They got Berg back, which is potentially one of the better pitchers in the conference. Their pitching is going to be really deep and quality, and some of the kids that were injured last year will be back in the mix for them, and they're getting some of the national recognition as we are. I think Stanford, with all that young pitching that they used last year, is going to be very good. And we think that Arizona State's really, even though the coaching staff's new, Coach Smith from Indiana does a good job. Their personnel is always very good, and I think they're going to be a force to be reckoned with as well. So I think Oregon, UCLA, Arizona State, and Stanford probably are going to get the most love from the outside of the top 25. But I think there's 11 good teams in the pack, and it'll be an interesting race.
Are you looking at probably Tolman, Chase, Heineman for 3, 4, 5?
That's probably as good a guess as any. I wouldn't say guess. Our program, they earn it, and those guys have the most experience. They've done that before. There's a St. Louis, there's a Uriste, there's some Goldfarb, there's some guys that have said, hey, look at me, I belong in the middle of the order. So the obvious pick would be those returning candidates that have done it before.
Besides Clevenger, is most of the back end of the bullpen up for like a race right now? Is there any spots settled?
No, I think 5 starters, you're not going to use 5 all the time. So one of those guys might slide into the 8th inning, 7th inning. I've been very pleased with Cooper Stiles, Coach's son, that has dropped his arm angle down, picked up some things from Darryl Hunter, quite frankly, when he was here. And he's been one of the more consistent guys that would maybe have a different look out of the bullpen. It might be that 7th, 8th inning guy to get to club. Very proud of Cooper's progress and his commitment to that, and the work that he's done with his dad has been very productive.
How big of a year do you expect out of Mitchell as one of the leaders coming back?
Well, I hope junioritis doesn't set in where I got to have a big year because it's my draft year, and that, you move along, and he's had a tremendous freshman and sophomore year, and then you don't know how he'll handle that. The pressure and rigors of going through where he knows a lot of the scouts are in the stands watching him, and I've seen some guys cave into that. I hope Mitch doesn't do that. I don't suspect him to do that. I think the fact that he's playing in the middle, and if he can be the same type of tough out, and I think he's one of the top 5 toughest outs in our conference, and when you're that guy, you're a good hitter. I thought he was on par with Michael Conforto last year, not necessarily with the home run production, but as one of the better hitters in the conference. And now he's playing second base, being a left-handed hitter. If he just is Mitchell Tolman and does what he did as a freshman and sophomore in the natural progression, I think he's got a chance to be recognized from the professional people and be one of the best players in the conference.
Is this the biggest, strongest, most athletic team you've had since you've been here? Just from first glance, both from practice and then under your roster.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I don't want to put too much pressure on it because we've had some great players, here. But I think Coach Waz, Coach Ullman have done a good job of identifying really good athletes, left-handed hitters with some strength, more than gap power. They can drive the ball over the fence in a pitcher's ballpark. And I think that without the excellence that Coach Waz and Coach Ullman do with running the offense and bunting game and execution game, I think if we just play billy ball and sit back and hit, we might be able to score some crooked number innings this year, which is encouraging.
How about the speed? Is that?
Yeah, I don't think we have any real blazers necessarily besides our center field candidates, but all above average runners and very athletic and instinctive base runners. So I think we're going to be able to steal some bases instead of have to give up outs with the sacrifice bunt.